Hi, this is Lori Leisure from Interior Design Community, and I have Niall with me, of course, as my co-host. Hi, Niall.
Hello. Hi.
And we have a Wendy Estela, who's an amazing interior design attorney. And I'm literally so excited to talk to her because you guys bring me questions all the time about contracts. We have our contract share for Interior Design Community. It's not enough. We know it. And we want to get all of those answers. But first, Wendy, tell us everything you can about like your business, what you do for designers.
Okay, how much time do we have? Let's see.
Wow.
I'm an attorney. I hate when people can guess that I'm an attorney. No one ever guesses it because I'm a very friendly, approachable person, which I'm told most attorneys are not. I've been a lawyer for 24 years. I'm a mother. I've got two kids. 11 and 13. And I work with all sorts of small businesses, but I have so many interior designers I work with. It's probably half of my practice at this point, if not more. And I do all sorts of things with designers. It's people that are just starting out. There are people that are very far along in their careers that are charging a lot per hour. Celebrity designers, 8100, Elle Decor, A-list, but everything in between. And my background prior to being in private practice, I kind of did the reverse thing that attorneys do. I was actually in-house. So I worked for big companies. So I understand how big companies operate. I understand what they're looking for. So when you're in your career getting into working with bigger companies and brands and things like that, I understand really both sides of it. So it's great. I love working with your industry. I'm inspired by all of you. I'm not a creative person, but I love being around all of you. And I really love working with the design community.
I love it. I love it. And believe me, designers have a lot of contract questions. Niall, I mean, you'll tell me too, like, I would say contract questions are pretty much the majority of the questions we're being asked on interior design community. There will always be an answer. You need to put this in your contract. Like that's
like, no, that's so true. Because it's funny. I have return clients that I'm working on a contract for right now. And I went back and I was like, I'm curious. I wonder what the contract was that I gave them when we first worked together in 2015.
Yeah.
And I looked at it and it was like 3 pages. And now I'm looking at my contract now and it's 28 pages. And I'm like,
wow.
They are going to be like, what happened between, 2015 and now that you now have this 28-page document? So it's nerve-wracking having to present that to them. Yes, yes.
I need to take a look at that. 28 pages. My God.
Yes,
that's probably a
yes,
record.
yes.
Honestly.
Yeah.
It's
called
long.
covering
It's
your
long.
butt.
Yeah.
Yeah. I get it though. I get
Yeah.
it. And you've got to put those things in because you need to be able to illustrate to the client all the potential things that could happen that could hurt you and that you want to avoid. So it's a method of communicating. I always say that if you have to rely on your contract, if you have to go to it and point it out to your client, that's not great. But you want to be able to go through it and explain it ahead of time and use it that way. And by having all of that there, it's there. So it's great. You can have those conversations.
Right. Like
It's
part of that,
good. That's
that
good.
process, that onboarding process is
absolutely
going through it and setting that expectation so that you don't have these problems down the road where they didn't understand that they're obligated to handle things a certain way. And it's just preparing it's another form of preparing everybody. Here are the rules of engagement, right? I mean, that's essentially what
and
you're
it
doing.
Also it shows the client that you have a certain level of professionalism, that you expect to be treated a certain way, that you have rules, and it's not just like their show and you're a supporting character. You're the one in charge. And it's a lot of them don't understand that because they think that they're paying you a lot and you're at their beck and call, but that is not how it works. It goes both ways. And that's your one chance before they hire you. It's your only chance to really say how you want to do things, because the minute they sign and the minute they pay you, the power dynamic shifts. So before they sign, they want you, but afterwards you're working to keep them. So you've got to really put everything into that document and just go through it with them at that point.
Right, right. So with a client contract, what do you think are the first, when you're talking to an interior designer, what are the first things that you ask them about what they would like to have in their client contract? Or do you give them a set boilerplate?
I don't have, I have a starting point, but I haven't created the same document for any designers. Like no two designers do everything the same. That's what I've learned. Number one, I always ask them what their experience has been. Like, what works for you, what doesn't. I don't just take their document and shred it and then, give them my template. I try to take what they give me and work with it, because I know that that is something they've been functioning with. And there's probably some things in there that are really how they do it. But what I ask them is, where did you get the document? It's usually something like a combination, it's cobbled together or they bought it online. That's great. But I always tell them, I don't want you to be working and running your business in accordance with the document. I want the document to reflect how you do your business, because otherwise you're always going to be behind. You don't want to be in a situation where something happens and you're like, well, let me see what my contract says. If you're in that position, it's all wrong. You have to know that. And it's not that you have to know it by heart. It's just that how you operate should be documented correctly. So then there's no memorizing a document. So I usually interview the client. I ask my clients, designers, I usually ask them just kind of what's going on, what their problem areas are. And as you know, it's the same for everyone. That whole wide audience of designers, the same issues.
Right, right. Now, I asked you this question right off the bat in the very beginning because I was curious. I know that there are, Designer Society of America has a contract, or they have a contract that they give to some of the members. I know ASID has like a contract. And I was wondering, like, you do work with clients all over the country. So you're not just, if this designer who's listening is in California and wants a design contract, you can provide them with a contract.
Yeah.
So it's not something where you can't do it if you're not in that.
Right. I mean, the way it works is because I'm a business lawyer, I'm not going to court to litigate. So I can really do pretty much anything. I can work with any business anywhere. And even if you're a sole proprietor, you're still a business. So it works. So I do have clients all over the place. California, I was on the phone with someone in North Carolina today, everywhere. A lot of New York people, obviously, because I'm in Connecticut. But yeah, I work with people everywhere. And really, the principles are roughly the same, no matter where you are. Like the laws are not that different state to state when it comes to contracts. There could be some things that are different with regards to how courts interpret certain provisions, but not really. I mean, it's a very well-developed body of law, contract law, and generally the principles are the same. The one thing that I do see that is different state to state is whether or not a designer can put a lien on a property if they're not paid. That is available in certain states, not in others. If you're in one of those states where you can lien or threaten to lien, that is a powerful tool. So, I look out for things like that. But aside from that, really the laws are very close state to state.
Right. That's wonderful. That actually, it helps designers, because then someone who is an attorney can specialize in interior design contracts, like what you're doing, and they'll understand the market of interior design, because interior designers have a huge risk because they are a middle person for so many business and such a high value dollar value in a project. So it's really scary, and you want someone who understands the business in general, because it's very unlike other industries in that there is so much risk and so much at play.
Yeah. And you're dealing with another party, the homeowner, who typically is wealthy and has power. Okay. And when something goes wrong, they know how to wield that power to abuse the situation.
Oh, absolutely.
If you're in a situation where you're getting sued by a homeowner, that's a tough position, because how are you going to defend yourself? They have a lot more resources most likely than you do. So even if you're right, and even if your contract is perfect, if you're sued, you've got to still defend it and spend the legal fees. So it's a tough position to be in, which is why one of the things I say is try to get at least alternative dispute resolution into your contracts. So arbitration, it stays private. It's quicker. It's more of a controlled process than litigation, which can go on and on for a period of time. You could be in front of a judge that knows nothing about design contracts. If you think lawyers know nothing, imagine going to your court, your local court, to go over these contracts. If you have arbitration, you can say, hey, we're going to settle this out of court. We're going to pick an arbitrator who is experienced in either construction or interior design. And you're already that much further ahead. You can also say that our dispute is going to happen and you specify the city, the state. Many designers are working in multiple states. So why not pick your home state so you have the home court advantage? There's things like that that are very important.
Yeah, I would imagine that would be huge. I mean, Niall, you've done projects all over, right? So that would help you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, yeah. I'm like taking all this in. Like this is
You're like 20, page 29.
yes,
exactly.
Exactly.
What
Exactly.
is like speaking of that, like what is a crazy clause you've written for one of your design clients? I'm curious because I hear, a lot of these clauses come based on problems happen, and some of the clauses that I've even just heard of in the design community, in our community, there's some crazy ones out there. So have you had any?
I don't think I've written any crazy ones, but I can tell you that I do think one that's really important that helps deal with crazy situations is the ability for the designer to fire the client if they feel like they or their workers are being harassed. And I've put that into many contracts because guess what? Your mental health matters. I know you want to get the photographs. I know you want to get this in your portfolio, but if someone's treating you like dirt, get rid of them. It's not worth it. And I guarantee there are people listening who are like, yeah, that was a great project I did. I dealt with all this abuse. I got to the end. They screwed me on the pictures. I got paid, but was it worth it? So giving the designer the ability to fire someone because of the way they're treated, I mean, that puts a lot of power on the designer and it fixes that relationship to some extent. And if you point that out when you're doing your page turn and you have a volatile client, they're going to be like, they might think twice before they start firing off crazy messages like late on a weekend night.
Right. Absolutely.
And then you write it.
Right.
Go ahead. I was just saying you write it so you get paid for everything. I mean, you really slant the payment. So let's say you're 2 weeks into it, you keep your whole design fee. That's it. And somebody's going to say, wait, I can lose it. And then you explain to your client, well, yeah. And that's where you use an illustration. You'll say, well, it never happened to me, but a friend of mine. And then you tell some story that illustrates how bad some, not all, some of these clients can be.
Right.
It's just not worth it. You're humans, there's business and there's your health, and it's just not worth it.
Now, do you ever protect the designer's right to have the photography? Because I've had two situations in our community that I've dealt with for designers where a lot of designers recommend having that in the contract, having that specific time and even outlining like this is how much time we need, because that photography session takes a full day. You're moving their stuff, you're putting in your stylist stuff, you're taking, and that's the only way that designers can translate the work that they do. So they ask for that time and they make sure that in the contract, they're given, a full, 8 hours, full 12 hours. Some even do a weekend,
right?
Because they need that time to get the photographs so that they can, for future sales. And then I've also had, the right to use those photographs in their marketing, because we had a designer who had a really weird problem where they didn't have it in their contract to get the photographs. They did get the photographs. And then later the designer was like, okay, you've used those photos enough. I need you to take them down.
Wow.
And I was like, tough crap. Like, tell them no, that's your marketing stuff. You have the copyright. Like, what are they going to do about it at this point? But that might be covered under a contract too, that you have the rights.
Absolutely.
It is their home, but it's your work.
Yeah, but you're stripping out personal details. That's very important. And
Right.
yes, I mean, you absolutely should put that in. I've put in different versions of that. Like I try to start with exactly what you said. It's going to be X number of days stuff that, maybe isn't even part of the design. By the way, the stuff that we bring to accessorize, you can buy it if you want, because it's usually the things that they didn't buy. Okay.
Right.
And I've got one client who let's her magic trick. She's like, I always make money the day of the shoot because they love how it looks and they buy everything that they didn't want to buy at the end of the project. So I put that in. Animals have to be crated, all of this stuff about just making sure the setting is what it needs to be, because the client, again, doesn't understand the importance of it. They don't understand that photography doesn't mean iPhone. Okay.
No.
They don't know that you're spending $10,000 on a photographer. Okay. They don't get it. You have to explain it. The one thing I find with designers that's very funny, I think, is that, you know, you're almost in your little vacuum, because I feel like a lot of designers have friends who are designers, and you're in your community and you talk about what you do, and it becomes so common that you assume that other people get it. Okay. And anyone outside your community, I promise you, does not get it. You could even explain it to them and they don't understand truly what you do. So really think about that and explain it now to your client. Like, you've got to explain like you're talking to a 10-year-old, which is not meant as an insult, but it's just like very much simplify what you're doing, no matter what it is, photography or whatever. But yes, absolutely, that's got to be in there. And I also say, I've actually pushed it a step further. I don't know if I've mentioned this to you before, but I said this recently in a talk. You can borrow concepts from the construction industry. Okay. You're lumped into this industry, like you're part of, you know, your contractors, or you're a trade, right? So why not borrow things that work for them? I haven't done this, but I've wanted to do it, and I'm waiting for the person that let me do it. You can write in that if the client doesn't let you do the photography, you're going to charge liquidated damages, and you're going to assess, you know, put the number $10,000. If you don't let me do this, I'm charging you this fee, because you can actually come up with a very good estimate of what it would cost you if they deprive you of that right. And you can write it in. And if the client signs that contract, it's enforceable. As long as a court doesn't look at it as a penalty and they can actually say, yeah, that looks like the right amount of damage to the designer, that's enforceable. So I have not put that in yet. I would probably start with putting that into a commercial contract, because stakes are higher, but that's something you could put in. And I mean, that will certainly start a discussion and get attention. The idea is not even to enforce it, it's to disincentivize.
I love it. I mean, I do think it would. I mean, I can think of a designer client that I had that we went to her photo shoot. The dogs were not crated.
Yeah.
Bothering her all day long about how long the photo shoot was taking and how they want to come home. And why are this is taking so long? We're 3 hours in. Like, I mean, this is going to be all day. She had hired a designer and a photographer and a stylist. So it was well over $10,000.
Easily.
Their attorney, their travel fees.
Right.
So this was such an expensive, you know, endeavor for her. She really wanted to get into publishing, which she did, thankfully. But all day, it was the most stressful situation, because her client was just so rude about it the entire time. It was such an inconvenience for them that we were there. And so, you know, I can imagine if that had been in the contract in the beginning, and maybe we had gone over that, or she had gone over that with the client from the very beginning, maybe they would have just been a little bit more hesitant to act the way they did, because hey, if I have to pay $10,000, I mean, this guy was a finance guy, so of course, like, he knows about money. I'm sure he would be like, yeah, I'm not going to give her a hard time about today, because I know I'll pay 10 grand. That would be great.
But I do think it's hard for a lot of people to put something like that into a contract.
It's scary.
And I'm guessing, like, Niall, would you put that on page 30?
That's tough. That's tough. Yeah. You know, but I'll say, you know, I have something similar and didn't realize I had put it in. I think I put it in the heat of the moment, and then went back when it happened and realized it was in there. And then I enforced it, and the clients paid me. Like, they broke the contract. And I had something in there that said, like, if you break the contract, you have to pay me. Not only do you pay me the design fee that's owed, but then you pay me a fee for just basically breaking the contract, because I didn't take any more projects, right? You know, and so we forecasted that we'd be getting, you know, paid from you. And so we don't take it on anything else, right? And I was like, oh, wow, I had this in here. And so I'm like, I need to bill them. And they paid, no problem. So I'm saying, no, I wouldn't put that in, but who knows? Because I probably wouldn't have put that in, and I did. So, you know.
Again, I think of it as more of like something you'd maybe see in a commercial job where there's more money, there's maybe a bank involved or something like that. So, you know, you put it in. And also, like I said, you see those in construction contracts all the time. Like, if a contractor misses a date, they're paying daily.
I honestly think it's a great, I think it's a great thing to put in the contract, because I don't think that, you know, in the beginning, when everybody's happy, I don't think that clients would bat an eyelash about signing that.
Never.
They're thinking they'll be fine with it. It's 2 years away or a year and a half.
Right.
They're not thinking that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
And so I don't think, but the opportunity cost that the designer loses by being able to, put that information on
Right.
their website or their social media, it sets them back. Some of these projects are level up projects for them.
Right.
So they are able to like get a different kind of client because they're showing
Right.
what they can do on a different level. And it is a huge cost to them if that isn't,
Right. Or they're submitting it to a publication or something like that. And it just,
absolutely.
I'm going to add one more thing on this concept of photography. I had a conversation today with somebody who works with celebrities and influencers, and she said that they often push back on photography because they want to be able to publish it. So that's a give and take. And I'd say in that type of situation, I mean, there's no right answer. It's probably, I'd say the goal there is there's not a winner and a loser. You have to always think that there's got to be a win-win solution. Because if you're looking at it like, no, it's all mine, and they're saying, oh, no, it's all theirs, no one wins. Like, or there's one winner, excuse me. But you can always craft a solution where you both are benefiting. So it's just interesting how it goes, because you do own those images. And I would be, well, you don't actually own them, your photographer does, but technically vis-a-vis the client, you own the images, they don't. So you should be able to, put your design out there. You own the design, you own, you can put that out there. It's yours. So
I love that. I love that. And you mentioned earlier that you put in a lot of your contracts about this mediation and
yeah.
disputes. Now, have you ever had a client go through a dispute, and how is that normally managed?
Well, it's funny because I have helped with certain disputes. I've stepped in. It's usually because their contracts did not have this alternative dispute resolution. They've been in this court system. And it's been interesting because, I mean, I have not been in one currently with an arbitration. Okay. But I can tell you, when it's court, what I said about the other party threatening to drag the designer's reputation through the mud because the lawsuit is public, using their resources. I had one homeowner threatened to like blast a client all over the newspaper, and they named the newspaper, and they were connected people. And it was just terrifying for the client because, you're up and coming, and is this really what you want? And then the complicated thing there is, if you don't have alternative dispute resolution, if you get sued, you have a right to make a counterclaim. So now you're suing your client. But do you want to be the designer that sues its clients? No. So you want it private. You have to always think about your reputation and, searchability and Google and, the internet of it, and keep it private as much as possible. And one thing you had mentioned, mediation, there's mediation and arbitration. Mediation is just a negotiation that is facilitated by like someone like me. I can't choose who wins. So I don't put mediation in, I put arbitration. Arbitration is you hire usually a lawyer or a retired judge, and that person makes the decision, and that's final. So it can't be appealed to court or anything. So the terms all get thrown around. Arbitration is the one you want. Mediation is almost a waste of time because you don't have to agree ever. And you could spend $30,000 preparing to get to mediation.
Oh my gosh, that's so fantastic.
It's a mess.
I just want to let everybody
info.
know too, we're going to cover employee contracts, licensing, which I know is very exciting. And then the best one, it will be photography at the end, but let's start going into employee contracts. Designers they've got their contract that they're working. That's an evolving document, I'm sure. And then they're hiring their employees. What are some things that they want to think about in that employee contract?
Okay. So the first thing is you have to think about, are you hiring an employee or a contractor, independent contractor? Is it a W-2 or a 1099? People use the terms wrong all the time. So I had one client send me a contract this week, and he's like, can you look at my 10 employee contract? And I was like, there's no such thing. If you have a 1099, that person's an independent contractor. Okay.
Yeah.
And a lot of businesses want to hire independent contractors because that's it. Their relationship is based on a contract. You're not paying your payroll taxes on them. They're independent contractors. And sometimes they're just popping in and doing a day of work here, a day of work there. You're maybe hiring them just for one project. If they're not part of your true day-to-day business, they're usually an independent contractor. Now, I'm going to say with a big disclaimer, that really depends state by state. There's specific rules. And I do help people walk through these rules in each state. It depends how much control you have over them, but you can't just willy-nilly say employee contractor. There's a test, but the thing to remember is there's a distinction. Okay. So 1099 person is an independent contractor. W-2 is an employee. Okay. So in many states, not all, but many employees, okay, they're at-will employees. So you can hire them and fire them whenever you want. You just cannot, you can fire them for any reason unless it's a discriminatory reason, which is obviously illegal. Okay. So when you have if you're in an at-will state, you don't have to give them a contract. You give them a job offer for a title, and that's it. I mean, you can give them a job description, but you don't give them a contract because they're just at-will employees. Likewise, they can quit anytime too. You know, it's customary to give 2 weeks notice, but not everybody does it. They could just quit and leave and there's no repercussions, right? So that's what at will means. Okay. Remember, you can't be discriminatory. And again, those rules vary state by state, but they're generally, you know, race, gender, sexual orientation, you know, religion, all those reasons. Okay. So obviously you can't fire someone for those reasons, but if you don't, I mean, if they're not meeting the dress code and you don't like it, fire. If you like, you're anything you want, you just decide you don't like them anymore, you can fire them. Okay. That's an at-will employee. And so again, so if you have an independent contractor, you do have a contract, they are responsible for a lot. It's like they have their own little business. If you have an employee, you give them an offer letter, and you usually have an employee handbook or some simple employment policies that you use. And that's really the framework for your employment arrangement. It's not a contract. So your employees are not under a contract. They're just at will per your policies.
Okay.
It's a little complicated, but honestly, if you Google it and read a little bit about it, there's tons of information out there about it. But that's the type of thing you should definitely ask a lawyer about, because you don't want to, if you misclassify and call somebody an independent contractor and they really look more like an employee to the eyes of your, you know, state unemployment board, you can get assessed taxes because you didn't pay them their unemployment tax. I mean, their payroll taxes. Right. So it's kind of complicated. It's sort of like the first growing pain of being a business owner. And it's a good juncture to either educate yourself, reach out to someone. Oftentimes a payroll company can give you the right guidance, honestly.
Right. And what about like, how do you address like confidentiality, NDAs?
Great question.
So like, I know the other thing is the big thing is intellectual property and
yes,
that photography that we just talked about, and them maybe starting their own business and using your work and to start their own business.
Great question. I mean, this is a huge issue in this industry. I've heard so many horror stories. Okay. But what you do is when you hire them, and it's important that it's at the time that they're brought in, whether it's a contractor or employee, you give them a document and they sign it. It's going to be either a confidentiality agreement. Also, you can add language that assigns any inventions or copyrights or anything they create when they work there, so they belong to you or your business. Okay. That's important because as you create something, it belongs to you as an individual. The default rule is it belongs to the individual. So in order for that design, for the person who works under you with your business name, for that design to belong to you, it has to be assigned. And it's one paragraph. It's one paragraph, or it could be a little bit longer if you want to make it a standalone agreement, but it's not overly complicated. It's an assignment of copyright, any intellectual property created while they work for you. Very important, because otherwise, who owns it? What happens to all that beautiful photography?
Right. Especially what if they took it? What if they were on site, you know, working as a junior designer, and they took the photograph? Technically, they own that photograph, the copy.
Right. But not, and here's the thing, if you write the right proprietary information assignment agreement, you can even own everything they create off the clock during the time that they work for you. Totally. Wow. So let's say they're running a side business against your rules, total side business. They're slacking at work. They've got their side business. You know, maybe they're using your work computer. Even if they're not, you can say, hey, your brain is what created it. And while you worked for me, that was everything that brain creates is assigned to me. You can do that. And as far as the confidentiality, that's even broader. You can say everything you come into contact with, whether it's written, it's in your, you see it, you hear it, it's all confidential. And it's confidential while you work here and when you leave. It survives. That obligation survives in perpetuity. So it's confidential. They can't take a client list. If you don't have that, this is a great issue. Actually, this has just come up recently for me. Longtime designer in business, years, decades, no agreements with anyone. Now he wants to close his business. And now what happens to the designers that want to move on, that have worked there for decades? Who owns what? Okay. What can that guy who owned the business sell to a potential buyer? He's got nothing. If the people leave, what type of business is he selling? So when you think of, this is like beyond even our conversation today, but like succession planning for your business, tie all of this down so that someday you actually have something to sell. Because if you don't have that intellectual property and you either get sick or you're getting older and you want to sell your business or move on, what are you selling? And if you don't have your client list protected, what are you selling? And by the way, the designers working for you have the relationships with those clients. So it's hard to protect that even. So there's a lot of things that you can do to tighten up your business today that actually create value for you down the line, 10 years from now, even, because all those designs are yours, not the person who worked for you. And you want to be able to sell that portfolio to the next buyer. Or give it to your kid if that's what you do with your business.
Right. That's huge. I mean,
by the way, don't give it to your kid, because
don't give it to your kid. They ruin it.
They don't want to do what you do. They want their own life. Anyway, side discussion. It's all tied together. But really, what does that guy have to sell at this point if he hasn't tied down his photos, his designs, everything? It's just a name, basically.
And how does this translate? That is so huge, because I definitely know every designer wants to sell at some point their business, or you're building a business. Every business is you're building. You're thinking like an electrician, a contractor. When they're retiring, they do sell their businesses because they have those books. But designers have a hard time with it. Even the biggest names I can think of have had a hard time with it. And usually what they end up doing is bringing on a partner, like that was their junior designer, and then having some sort of like, you can take over, you pay me a certain number of
Right,
years,
like a buyout or something.
A buyout kind of situation.
Well, what are they even buying, right?
Right.
What are they buying? Here's one tip. Okay, a time that you would want a contract with your employee is around that time. So now you have a great person. You do not want them to leave. You're selling the business. You lock them down. You say, okay, I know you're at will, but we can actually sign a document that makes you stay here for a period of time. Because you can still do that. Even if you have an at will employee, you can still have a contract. You don't have to. You usually see that with like high level executives who have a bonus structure and they want it written. Okay. But let's say you've got a key employee that you want to sell along with the business, have them sign a 5-year contract. Now you're selling the employee to the future buyer. It's something at least. Okay. But it's very hard. I mean, it's hard to preserve the value of your business when you're in a service that you are providing.
Right.
So you've got to build up the brand, all of it. If you have a trademark, that's helpful. At least you have that. I mean, these things you can assign a value to, but if it's just people and you haven't controlled those people, you're just asking for a lot of heartache, because that's what it is. It's so personal.
Right. Do you think that it's a good strategy, like longer term, to maybe, have a plan to, sort of like an attorney's office does, graduate your senior designers up to become partners? Is that, where you could have, more partners in your firm, instead of just, doing it a different way where you're more like making employees have equity instead of.
Well, it's interesting. I just had this discussion too with different type of business, but a lot of people throw around the word equity and they want to give out equity to good people, right? They want them to have skin in the game. I don't love that, because I don't want to give anyone an interest in what I own. I want to still be in control of everything. And if you give away even 1%, that person has certain rights. Okay. So I kind of, don't like that, but it can be done. I just don't love it. But what I recommend is at least paying your people the right way. incentivize them, give them a bonus, I just helped somebody with an employment offer and it was competitive. And they're like, this guy, I really want him. So we gave the person a sign-on bonus and it's earned over, a period of time, but it was big. It was a good amount, but it was tied to certain milestones. So cash is king. Cash incentivizes people. I think that people would rather have cash than even a 1% stake in a company, because what does that even mean? It's not valuable until you sell it, So it's better to incentivize with cash, in my opinion, and then maybe with titles. So, but I wouldn't write anything down like after 7 years you get this. It should really be in your own discretion as a business owner. But absolutely, people like nice titles. They like perks. They like an expense account. They like, little things to make them feel important. And talk too much about generations, but we know that the younger generations coming up value all of that. So, that's more valuable in my experience than giving like a 1% equity grant or making someone a 10% minority shareholder. It's just that opens them up to risk too. So, because they're 10% responsible. So the cash is nice, right?
Yes,
So
absolutely. Yeah.
And like I said, if you've got key people and you're, moving on, you incentivize them with a contract. You can write in bonuses. You can write in, if you achieve this much in sales, I'm going to give you this, like that kind of incentive, maybe a production incentive or something. That's a positive. People
Oh,
like
yeah.
those things because then they're not waiting to see if they're doing a good job. They know that if they hit this, they're going to get this reward.
Niall, how do you handle it with your employees? Like,
I don't have employees.
oh, you don't?
It's funny.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I have 1099, and it's funny
Okay.
because I thought, oh, I don't want independent contractors. I want people that'll come. I want part-timers that'll work, and that's what I want because that's how I know people will be loyal to me. And that didn't work. Like getting a part-timer or part-timers, having a team, it didn't work. I didn't feel like people wanted to push the brand, if you will, forward. And then I had a 1099 person come along who has her own project management firm. And she hustles harder than I do because she understands that if she eats, I eat, or if I eat, she
Yes.
eats. And like, if I'm like being like lackluster, she's like, oh, what's going, like, we got to get some clients through the door. Like, what's going on? We got to hustle. And so I found that like having someone that has their own business too, to sort of double up with me, that has been the perfect combination for me. So it's a beautiful arrangement. It really, really is.
Amazing.
That happens more than you would expect. Like I've been hearing that more and more designers having professional relationships with other business owners. And sometimes it's even another designer where they have separate businesses, but they're acting as partners in the business.
Yes, very popular.
It's really interesting how they're playing around with that, but it's like I'm sure that there's a level of contract that has
that's a contract. That's basically a contractual joint venture. So now I'm throwing out these words, but you've heard joint venture. It's just you're coming together and you're doing something. You're not forming a new entity. You're just two businesses entering into a contract, and you can agree how you're going to split things. You can even come up with a new business name and file it as a trade name. You do not have to start a new LLC together. You are just loosely connected. If it goes wrong, you just break up. That's it. It's not a dissolution of the LLC. It's just an affiliation. It's like it could be for a period of time. It could be 5 years. It's like when you see these collaborations between brands, like big brands, you see it and they're cool because they're fresh and interesting, and like you want to see what they're going to do together, and it could just be short term.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So now we'll get into licensing contracts because I know designers are so excited about licensing deals. Some of them have that as the dream at the end of like the rainbow of, creating a great business that they can work with brands and have licensing deals. And, it's not the be all end all because of course you need lots of licensing deals for it to actually make money.
Exactly. I was just going to say that.
But let's talk about what factors are you thinking about when you start this? The designer comes to you and says, I wanted this to be my next move. How do I go forward and protect myself?
Okay, so it's all like the same things, basically. The number one thing for designers, intellectual property. you have to look, that agreement is talking about, you know, kind of bringing brands together. And there's going to be a discussion of IP on both sides. You have to look at what you're really giving them. So, you know, you can be designing some furniture for a brand, and, you know, who creates that? I mean, who owns that design? Again, is it you? Is it them? Is it joint? It's typically them. So you're doing what's called a work for hire. So similar to what we talked about with your employee, that you're going to say, hey, everything you create for me is mine. Well, everything you create for that big company is probably theirs. And a lot of these contracts are written in a subjective way. So, and people are afraid of them because you're dealing with a big entity and you're just this little person, and you're assuming you can't even negotiate it. Maybe you can negotiate the royalties or something, but you're thinking, I probably can't change these words that much, but you can. Okay, so that's number one. You could definitely negotiate. But the things to look for in those agreements are, what kind of rights are you giving? Are you giving them exclusive rights to the design? Do you have some right? What happens there? You know, who owns what? What can you do? So then with those rights, what can you do as far as sharing it? Can you claim it as yours? Is it theirs? You have to look at the way they want you to promote. That's very specific. They can say, you need to make X number of posts on social media in a month, and these are the things you're going to show. And you might not even like what they're doing, that they're telling you to post. You might not like it. So you've got to be very careful reviewing the language to make sure you have some input. So you can read these contracts and it'll say, in the sole discretion of big company. When it says sole discretion, they're calling the shots. You don't have any input. So I would say to look throughout a contract like that for a collaboration versus them telling you what to do, because you're basically theirs for whatever period of time you agree to that licensing agreement. And it might look great and exciting, but you know, you don't know if the person that you talked to originally is really going to be the person that's directing the whole operation. So that's key.
There at the end too. I mean, that
exactly. So you could have a huge creative, like disagreement, but you're stuck because you're legally bound. Okay. So that's tricky. You're almost at their mercy. Okay. So I would negotiate those provisions so you have some input, because this is still you, even if you're affiliated. Okay.
Right.
Another thing in these agreements is always, okay, it's all about money, right? I know it's about, you know, reputation and stuff, but when it comes to the money, the calculation, one big definition you'll see is net sales. It'll say net sales. You're going to get a percentage of the net sales. Read that definition very carefully, because what are net sales? They'll put in marketing costs. They'll put in, you know, all these things. And so the net sales they're making are very low at the end of the day. So you've got to go through that with a fine tooth comb and say, no, or at least if they're going to put marketing, you know, reasonable, or you add words like that, because otherwise they're going to really cut down what they're saying is what they made off of this product line. And now your 3, 4, 5% is nothing. You know, it's really low. The other things I would look for are, how are they, never mind you. Okay. We know you're going to have to promote the product, go stage things, decorate, whatever, you know, do publicity. What do they have to do? And do they have to do it? Or does it say big company may do this? So what if you spend all this time developing a product line and then they just kind of lose interest and they don't promote it the way that you thought they would? Was it worth it? So those are the types of questions. If you're getting paid based on their net sales, they need to have some incentive to actually make this product work, because the worst thing would be a failure, you know, and it's not because of you, it's because they didn't do anything. They just changed direction. So that's the type of thing I would look for in those arrangements. And I would just caution designers that it's a very exciting time, but just slow down.
Yeah. Really.
And I think if you,
talk to an attorney first. Talk to an attorney first too, because
absolutely
you're going to want the idea, like before you even approach the brands, I think, to have a clear plan in place so that you know what you're going to be asking for. So when you do pitch it, because usually it's the designer pitching the brand,
right?
Sometimes it's the brand coming to the designer,
right?
But a lot of times it's a designer pitching a brand, they have a big audience, they want a next level, they want their own licensing deal, and they pitch a brand, they meet a brand at a trade show, they
Right.
have clients that would love this style, of your furniture or whatever. And, that if you don't have that thought before you get into it and really even think about, do I want to be there? Do I want to spend that effort? It's tough.
Yeah. And, I think it's important to, and first of all, in negotiations, you always have to know what your walk away point is. Okay. So it's a similar concept. If you can't identify your walk away point, it's like you're flying a plane and you don't know if you're upside down or you don't know, you're losing sight of the horizon. Okay. So you have to know the walk away point. And and then you have to also just be true to yourself. So you have to have some ideas of like, okay, this business didn't want it, but Target wants it. Do I want to be with Target? Do I want to be, what do you want for your brand? Do you want to, you just have to think about it, articulate it, write it down, because I do know that oftentimes the growth comes so fast and you end up over here when you want it to be over here. And then you say, how did I get here? And then there's a like kind of pulling back period. So think about it, be thoughtful about it. Don't just like chase shiny things.
It's hard not to. It really we
and
all
when the
get so
opportunity
excited. Yes, we're
right.
creative, so we get so like, it's that like shiny object. We just want it. And I think there's a lot of ego in there.
Huge. I mean, they want me. They want me. They can have me.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
I'm going to make so much money.
You're not.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
You're not.
You're not.
You don't get rich from that.
No, no. The designers that have made really great licensing deals have multiple licensing deals. Like they have hundreds of licensing deals, and that's why they are making money. Not
but
one.
They're right, but they don't leave their design roots behind either.
No,
it's still the core business.
And they craft it in a way that, really, they think they're thinking about the future from the very beginning, I think.
Right. I mean, you have to always remember with all of this that you're a creative person, but you're also an entrepreneur. They're very hard to balance. And you've got to, I mean, if you could sit down at the beginning and write a business plan, it's huge. That will be your path towards all of these wonderful things.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the last thing, which is my favorite thing to talk about is photography contracts, because I have my own ideas from all these years of listening to designers complain about photography, that designers should have their own photography contracts, because I think it's ridiculous that we're letting the photographers make the rules here when we're paying. I mean, designers are paying big money for these photos and these photo sessions. And it's the only way to translate their art is by bringing in a photographer, and then they're beholden to this photographer and their set of rules. I really, really want designers to have their own photography contract. If I can get anything from this podcast, it would be every designer who's listening right now to have their own photography contract. I don't care what's in it. I just want you to have your own rules, and you to be happy with your own rules. So what are some, factors that, about what you're thinking about licensing and copyright and how a designer can protect themselves?
Okay. So, we could have called this like the lesson on intellectual property, because it always comes down to intellectual property. So here it's the same thing. Who is taking the photo? The photographer. Who owns the image? The photographer. Okay. First of all, a lot of the reasons why the photographer has the contract is because whenever two people come together to make a deal, who has the contract? I mean, it's just out of default. We're just letting them do it. Okay. No one wants to have to think about putting that contract together. No one's thinking to call the lawyer and say, can you put one together for me quickly? Okay. No one. So the photographer by default has it. And if you sign no contract, so let's just say you're just getting a photo shoot for your kids, okay, for a holiday card, the photographer by default owns the images. So to undo that, you've got to have in your contract that this is a work for hire. There's actual language with like a statutory reference, and you're hiring them for the work, and the copyright gets moved over to you. It gets assigned to you. So very similar to what we're talking about with the employees, the copyright gets assigned to you. Work for hire. You are paying to own the image. That's the key of it. If there's nothing else in that agreement, and you say, I'm going to pay you this amount and I own the copyright, you've won right there. And I just feel like this has to be industry standard, just like you say. I think that I don't know how to do it, but I feel like there needs to be a designer's bill of rights. I mean, maybe do we have to go to Washington, D.C. and like carry flags?
Niall, we'll
Like,
do it. Come on.
I
Let's
feel like,
march.
I feel like we need to do it. I mean, I feel like there needs to be certain things that just everyone does, or at least aspires to do. And
Yeah.
I mean, that's along the lines of like the markup and the people who don't charge a markup. Like, no, no,
Yeah.
no. You know, move
Yeah.
it to even beyond that. If you do this with photography, that's huge. You are now really owning everything and you're not held hostage by the photographer. And Lori, you had mentioned to me about, you know, how a photographer had taken an image and like adjusted it and a designer saw it somewhere.
Oh yeah, they were at High Point.
I mean,
and she walked into High Point and saw her own kitchen with her lighting photoshopped out and this crappy lighting in it, and she had no idea. And that particular instance, the photographer sold the image to the manufacturer. But we recently this week had two big box stores, Bed Bath and Beyond, Home Depot, where just a bunch of designers' images were being shown with their stuff photoshopped out. I don't think in that particular case the big box stores knew. I think it was the vendor who manufactured the product who sent all those SKUs in, you know, probably bought in, you know, Asia somewhere, and they did that. Maybe they even hired a firm that did it, that you know, took these, you know, just created this artwork for them, and that's how it happened. But at the end of the day, it's the small business designer who's getting their work taken, and the photographer in that instance. But it would be so much easier if the designer had that copyright to be able to handle that problem, because now they're also having to go to their photographer and say, do you see that this is our work that's being taken, and that it's two people that have to care to make sure that anything gets taken down. And it's really difficult. And I think that I do understand the photographer's rights to, you know, if you're getting it published, or if you're selling, if the designer themselves wanted to sell it, you know, maybe what they're paying for should be increased. Maybe they should get a percentage for it. I'm not trying to take away their money, but I do think holding the right gives the designer a lot more freedom. I've seen photographers hold back rights to designers getting it published because they wanted from it. I've seen them hold back rights because they don't want you, they want more money if you want to enter into a design contest. I've had them complain about designers sharing with a manufacturer so the manufacturer could use it on social or in a blog post. Like, no one was getting paid there. There was no money. You know, it was just about promotion, which was what the designer hired that photographer to do, is help them get promotion for their work. Like, you should never
at a minimum, you have to have the right to use your own photo and to be able to submit it to publications or whatever you want to use it for. But no, but think about this too. I mean, we already said in our contract with the client, you're going to say, I'm using your photos for this purpose. I'm not going to do this without telling you, whatever. You lose control of everything you just promised your client if you don't have control of your photographer. So, you know, maybe that client was very particular and wanted a heads up or wanted to approve if you're going to submit it to a publication. Now this photographer is submitting it to Bed Bath and Beyond or whatever is there at this point, right? That is problematic. You will get sued if that happens, because now you breached your client contract, not because of anything you did, but because of somebody who you control, who's essentially your subcontractor. That is terrifying, right? So tighten it up, tighten it all up.
Yes, have some control over it. And I think that that's something that designers don't think of. And that's designers that I've talked to, a majority of their marketing budget is photography. That's their biggest expense, besides like all of the procurement, is photos. It's incredible that it's just not widely understood that they should have their own contract. I don't hear even the bigger associations talking about it. Do you now?
No, because go ahead.
No. I mean, it's not even a factor. Like it's, you know,
Yeah,
you,
but the members of our community, they talk about it nonstop. We
oh
talk
yeah.
it's every day. It's like, this designer took my photo and shared it, and without my permission or tagging me. This person, you know, my contractor took my photos and he's like got it on his website without crediting me. And this person but you're adding the layer of confusion because now you can't go after those people. You can't talk to those people
Right.
about it, really, because it's not your right. It's really the copyright is the photographer. So
he's not doing anything wrong.
Yeah.
He's not doing anything wrong in his mind or her mind.
Right. And you're stuck with this like lack of power. And you're
it's
paid $10,000.
And it's like, because you know why? Because we don't ask, right? What do they say? Like you get offered a job in a company and you don't negotiate it. Well, you left it on the table. You left the money on the table. It doesn't hurt to ask. I tell people with negotiations, start small. Just start building up your confidence with little things. Every day, find something small to negotiate. Like when you go to Starbucks, ask for like a sample of something, you know, like whatever it is to build up your confidence. Okay. And then you're going to get to the point where you're like, I'm telling this photographer, this is my money. I'm buying those images. You know, I'm going to jot this down, at least take his contract and mark it up, like change it so that you have what you need at a minimum.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so
good.
much for that alone. That was huge. That's going to change so many lives right now. I mean, I can just see it. And anyone who's listening now, I know this is something that you have struggled with, or you have a friend who's struggled with it. And it's just that lack of control, and all of those things lead the designer to have sleepless nights and worries and problems. And they're obsessing about these problems that lead them to not be able to enjoy the time off that they get. And that's something that's the reason we have this podcast, is so we can give you that empowerment to make these decisions so that you actually can use your off time to have fun.
Yes.
And actually shut up.
Exactly. Yes. Well, thank you so much, Wendy. And by the way, for the audience, you are going to be getting something special from Wendy.
Yes.
Too. But we are so happy you joined us, and, you know, just thanks for all your information.
My pleasure. And I'm always here. I'm on Instagram. I answer questions. I do things all the time to try to help this community because I'm a woman-owned business. I feel like there's a lot of woman-owned, you know, minority-owned, gay-owned, you know, we have to fight a little harder. Okay. And if I could do anything to help this community, then it makes me very happy. So reach out anytime.
We will. Yeah. Do not worry about that. Expect some calls.
Of course.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thanks.
Stop